9 minutes. Yes. Use my French because I need the Wi-Fi. Maybe it's now.
Prova, prova, prova.
Yes. Maybe there's one. I think this is your best bet. Until you do all the salute, you just start with the salute. But because
usually for you to use your laptop, you going and come back with the slide.
try again. Okay. This one. It's free. Yes, it's free, but well connected with the yes, good.
Questo.
Ah, questo. Non lo spegne. Prova audio.
Ci siamo persi Francesca Albanese, spirito libero, è andata in giro, non sappiamo più dov'è, adesso forse... Ecco, sta arrivando, così iniziamo.
Buongiorno a tutte e tutti, ricordiamo che l'evento si terrà in lingua inglese ed è possibile seguirlo anche in diretta streaming sul canale YouTube di Tlon e nella sala Ersoc qua fuori. Iniziamo con i saluti istituzionali. Sono qui con noi Giovanni Formica, il direttore del Dipartimento di Architettura, che porterà anche i saluti del rettore, e Giovanni Caudo, il coordinatore della laurea magistrale in Architettura Progettazione Urbana. Abbiamo con noi anche Andrea Colamedici, fondatore di Tlon e organizzatore dell'evento. Buon evento a tutti.
Un saluto a tutte e tutti, vi chiedo scusa per il ritardo, cercherò di farvi guadagnare tempo. Mi ha appena scritto il rettore che purtroppo non riesce a passare qui per dei saluti perché è stato trattenuto il rettorato e c'era una delegazione del Taiwan e ancora non sono riusciti a chiudere i lavori. Ci ha tenuto però a scrivermi che oltre ai saluti, di ringraziare relatrici e relatori e gli organizzatori e comunicare che l'università, oltre che luogo di formazione e ricerca, è una comunità etica chiamata a promuovere il rispetto dei diritti umani e il ripudio della guerra. Il nostro compito è anche di educare la cittadinanza globale, abbiamo il dovere di capire, discutere e conoscere e tuttavia non si può e non si deve parlare di guerre e di massacri con i toni della violenza. Noi siamo il contrario, siamo un ponte e siamo il dialogo, per cui benvengano incontri come quelli di oggi che contribuiscono tramite la cultura e il dialogo alla convivenza pacifica. Un caro saluto. Questo è il rettore. Io, ripeto, non aggiungo altro anche perché sono tremendamente emozionato. Siamo una comunità piccola ma molto coesa e vedervi qui tutte e tutti oggi è un grandissimo segnale. Abbiamo organizzato questa conferenza proprio perché siamo una realtà piccola con non poche difficoltà, quindi ribadisco un ringraziamento oltre ai nostri ospiti anche di tutte le persone che hanno lavorato per rendere questa giornata possibile. E abbiamo, come dire, tutti noi delle difficoltà chiaramente perché il dolore è tanto e tale per cui è difficile poi trovare delle parole esatte, però se, diciamo così, come mia speranza personale, se delle parole si possono trovare, delle parole, dei pensieri, forse è anche approcciandoci in questi luoghi della cultura, approcciare questo tipo di discorsi con la scientificità e con la sapienza con cui Eyal vi mostrerà i suoi studi. Vi ringrazio ancora e passo la parola al coordinatore della laurea magistrale Architettura Progettazione Urbana. Grazie.
Grazie, buongiorno a tutte e tutti, grazie per la partecipazione così numerosa e anche appassionata. Grazie non formale al direttore Formica per aver colto con entusiasmo questa iniziativa, questa proposta, e anche grazie al Rettore che ci aveva dato la sua disponibilità e che è stato impedito ad essere qui, ma appunto, come avete sentito, è vicino nella nostra iniziativa. In altri atenei, anche molto più blasonati del nostro, c'è molta meno possibilità di esprimere in pieno la libertà di pensiero. Questo è un ranking che ci piace, quello di Roma 3, vorremmo difenderlo, vorremmo continuare ad essere luogo di espressione libera del pensiero, ci piace, è quello che vogliamo continuare e su cui vogliamo continuare a distinguerci. Grazie ai nostri ospiti e a Francesco Careri, alla libreria Tlon, che ha colto l'opportunità e come spesso le cose che sono belle nascono senza nessuna programmazione, preavviso, come avete visto siamo in ritardo, le cose accadono mentre succedono. Grazie per aver colto l'opportunità di avere qui due persone, due protagonisti che sentiamo molto vicini e che vogliamo ringraziare per essere qui con noi. Li vogliamo ringraziare per aver preso voce in questo tempo in cui ci vogliono zittire, e vogliono zittire tutti quelli che danno voce all'altro che è umiliato, braccato, affamato, spesso ucciso. Quelli che ci vogliono zittire mentre diciamo che noi vogliamo restare umani. Siamo qui oggi perché vogliamo testimoniare la vicinanza di questa assemblea fatta di studenti, di persone che si sono mosse in queste settimane per un moto proprio, no, di vicinanza al popolo di Gaza, ai palestinesi, per essere solidali con i cittadini israeliani che, come noi, condannano un governo che ha deliberatamente sterminato decine di migliaia di uomini, donne e bambini. Una strategia di violenza che, dopo la strage terribile del 7 ottobre che ha provocato morte e dolore, mirava a debellare definitivamente Hamas dal territorio di Gaza. E da qui, con le parole Hamas, come ci ricorda Francesca Albanese, si giustificava e si è giustificato ogni atto, anche il più efferato. Si è permesso al governo di Israele anche l'inaudito. Come ha scritto Anna Foa, abbiamo assistito al suicidio di Israele. La cosa che ci fa riflettere è che oggi, mentre parliamo qui in questo momento, si stanno riunendo gli israeliani, una delegazione israeliana, una delegazione di Hamas, per discutere una possibilità, uno spiraglio di pace. Ecco, forse questa cosa si poteva fare senza bisogno di arrivare alle migliaia di vite umane che sono state sacrificate in questi ultimi 2 anni. Nella nostra Costituzione c'è l'articolo 11 che ripudia la guerra come strumento di offesa alla libertà degli altri popoli e come mezzo di risoluzione delle controversie internazionali. La nostra bella Costituzione coglie non solo una cosa eticamente giusta, non fare la guerra, ma che non fare la guerra è il modo migliore per provocare la pace ed evitare inutili morti, come è successo in questo caso. Ma siamo qui anche per ragionare assieme sul tempo che ci è dato di vivere e sulla consapevolezza del nostro compito come persone, docenti, studenti e architetti. Questa giornata è stata pensata come l'inaugurazione del semestre. Tim Ingold è un antropologo che spesso citiamo, ci ricorda di pensarci come linee che si intrecciano, che avvolgono l'uno con l'altro e che legano il passato e il presente e viceversa. Fare un torto, arrecare una violenza inaudita, che succeda a un bambino palestinese come a una donna israeliana, ci riguarda molto da vicino. Abbiamo dimenticato, credo molto velocemente, la lezione del Covid e di come i nostri destini, ovunque siamo, chiunque siamo, sono tutti intrecciati, ma soprattutto abbiamo dimenticato di essere vulnerabili come uomini l'uno all'altro. La vulnerabilità, ci ha insegnato Elena Pulcini, può essere la nostra forza. Se la paura dell'altro diventa solidarietà con l'altro, perché anche lui è vulnerabile a noi. È solo da questa consapevolezza, dalla vulnerabilità reciproca, che può nascere la comunità buona, scriveva Elena Pulcini. Noi siamo vulnerabili all'altro, ma a sua volta anche l'altro lo è a causa nostra. Ecco, è la consapevolezza di questa vulnerabilità ciò che oggi distingue chi sta dalla parte giusta e chi invece resta dalla parte sbagliata. Saper riconoscere la vulnerabilità reciproca a cui siamo esposti è il primo passo per costruire l'incomune che ci consente di vivere assieme. Ecco una frase e un messaggio per tutti noi e per gli studenti. Come progettare, come fare spazio alla possibilità di vivere insieme. Vivere insieme nel mondo, scriveva Hannah Arendt, e mi piace citare Hannah Arendt, che forse è stata la prima ebrea vittima del sovranismo ebraico. Quando scrisse il testo La banalità del male fu emarginata dalla stessa comunità ebraica. In fondo lei aveva semplicemente seguito, come sapete, il processo ad Adolf Eichmann. Era il 1963. Ma appunto Hannah Arendt ci dice che vivere insieme nel mondo significa essenzialmente che esiste un mondo di cose tra coloro che lo hanno in comune. Il mondo, dice lei, è come un tavolo che è posto tra quelli che vi siedono intorno. Il mondo, come ogni infra, mette in relazione e separa gli uomini. A noi tutti, anche in quanto architetti, spetta costruire questo mondo in comune. Per questo non c'era lezione, non c'era incontro migliore per iniziare il nostro semestre e il nuovo anno dei corsi del Dipartimento di Architettura e delle lauree magistrali in progettazione urbana. Perché oggi assistiamo esattamente al contrario, con le distruzioni sistematiche delle case di Gaza, con i bombardamenti dei civili a Kiev, con i muri lungo il confine messicano, con le parole dell'uomo politico più importante del mondo che indica l'altro da noi come un nemico da abbattere e nega il cambiamento climatico. Siamo qui per resistere anche con il nostro mestiere, al piano inclinato del nostro tempo. Le testimonianze che sentirete del professor Weizman e della relatrice dell'ONU Francesca Albanese fanno luce sulle strategie che mirano a separare, a confinare, ad espellere e alla fine forse ad annientare gli altri. Viviamo tempi interessanti. Secondo un detto cinese, i tempi interessanti sono quelli che augureresti di far vivere al tuo peggior nemico, perché sono tempi eccezionali in cui si è perso il senso delle cose, in cui ogni cosa sfugge a una possibilità di governo, in cui ognuno resta schiacciato dagli eventi. Ecco, se ci è dato vivere tempi interessanti, dobbiamo anche sapere che è necessario reagire e riprenderci la consapevolezza delle cose. Se siamo qui oggi è anche per questo, per manifestare col nostro corpo la consapevolezza del noi ci siamo, noi resistiamo. C'è un antidoto che ognuno di noi può usare ed è nell'uso che facciamo delle parole. Può sembrarvi banale, ma non lo è. Non si dice genocidio, si cercano le varianti, si studiano tutte le declinazioni. Allora meglio massacro. Non si chiama guerra, ma operazione speciale. Non si chiamano uccisioni, ma incidenti, anche quando spari intenzionalmente sui soccorritori che stanno salvando delle vite e non lo fai solo una volta, ma 2, 3. Non si tratta di volontari disarmati che rischiano la loro vita per degli ideali. Cosa c'è di più nobile? No, sono crocieristi o passeggeri di Hamas. Il modo in cui usiamo le parole è il primo atto di guerra per distruggere l'incomune, evocato da Hannah Arendt. Per questo dobbiamo fare attenzione. Dobbiamo fare attenzione, intanto perché siamo in uno spazio di ricerca, di studio, siamo all'università e dobbiamo fare attenzione a come vengono usate le parole, al linguaggio che tradisce le reali intenzioni. Forgiare le parole, riscaldarle per poi agitarle contro qualcuno è già fascismo. L'incomune lo costruiamo con i mattoni, ma lo cominciamo a distruggere con la leggerezza, la superficialità e peggio, con la travisazione voluta e cercata delle parole a cui seguono spesso le bombe e le macerie. Noi ci occupiamo di terra, di territorio, una parola che in francese deriva anche da terrore. Sì, perché il territorio, da quando lo dividiamo per appropriarcene, è la fonte principale delle guerre. Da sempre linee e confini fatti per separare presto o tardi presentano il conto, che spesso è carico di sangue, terra e sangue. Nell'era del digitale, che non ha confini o li supera, inaugurata con l'eliminazione del muro di Berlino, il territorio è tornato ad essere la contesa con cui si confrontano gli stati, in Ucraina, a Gaza, nello Yemen. Non è un paradosso, se lo guardiamo dal punto di vista di Bruno Latour e del suo appello a ritorno alla terra, all'atteraggio. È stato questo il suo testamento poco prima di morire. Quella dell'atteraggio è una condizione necessaria, data dalla nostra incapacità di vivere solo il digitale e di essere separati dal suolo, di essere solo dislocati. E questo atterraggio che oggi rappresenta la sfida dei nostri tempi, la contesa, è su come farlo, su come interpretarlo. Al momento, nel mondo stanno vincendo quelli che interpretano questo bisogno come un ritorno al passato, alla frammentazione degli stati-nazione, da qui l'uso retorico della parola patria e del sovranismo. Ci eravamo illusi con la globalizzazione che l'aspro e rude aspetto della terra fosse diventato un globo liscio facile da attraversare. E invece ci ritroviamo in un mondo collassato su se stesso, tutto in frammenti, che riusa il filo spinato, le trincee, affama il nemico, lo rinchiude in campi di concentramento come le mappe che ci farà vedere Weizman illustrano. Spetta a noi, ma soprattutto spetta a voi giovani che siete il futuro, raccontare un ritorno alla terra diverso. Siate consapevoli del tempo che viviamo. Partecipando a questo incontro testimoniamo la missione del nostro mestiere, costruire il mondo in comune che ci riunisce insieme e che tuttavia impedisce di caderci l'uno sull'altro. Ecco, questo è il nostro compito, fare e dare spazio all'imperativo di come vivremo insieme. Prendo in prestito, e ho finito, le parole di Marina Garcés, filosofa attivista catalana, che ci invita a coltivare la speranza, una parola consumata nel nostro linguaggio. La speranza non nel senso che è un treno che non arriva mai, ma nel senso di qualcosa che attraverso una bella espressione che usa Marina Garcés, lei usa occupate la speranza. Occupare la speranza è un atto politico e collettivo, non ingenuo né consolatorio. La speranza per lei è un sentimento privato o religioso, ma non è un sentimento privato o religioso, ma una forma di responsabilità condivisa verso il mondo. L'impegno a rendere il mondo abitabile, a non consegnarlo alla distruzione o alla passività. Rieduchiamoci quindi alla speranza, rendiamo il possibile, non nel senso del pragmatismo, di quello che potrebbe accadere comunque accada, no, il possibile nel senso di quello che è possibile che accada e che ancora oggi non c'è. Ma intanto, benvenuti in questa università, buon ascolto e buon inizio di semestre.
Ringrazio il direttore Fiorucci, il direttore Formica e il coordinatore Caudo, grazie in particolare al professor Francesco Careri per aver favorito questo incontro. La vostra disponibilità a ospitare una conversazione così urgente e necessaria dice qualcosa di fondamentale sul ruolo e la funzione che l'università può e deve avere in momenti come questo. Abbiamo cercato uno spazio che potesse accogliere questa conversazione e il Dipartimento di Architettura di Roma 3 ha compreso immediatamente, perché un dialogo sulla cartografia del genocidio non è solo un intervento politico urgentissimo, ma anche una questione che tocca il cuore della riflessione architettonica contemporanea. Vi presento i relatori dell'incontro di oggi. Entrambi affrontano la stessa domanda, in fondo. Come si costruisce una testimonianza che sappia resistere alla propaganda, al negazionismo, all'indifferenza, alla violenza istituzionale di chi cerca di silenziare chi testimonia? Eyal Weizman è architetto e direttore di Forensic Architecture, un'agenzia di ricerca fondata nel 2010 al Goldsmiths College di Londra che ha trasformato radicalmente il modo in cui pensiamo alla relazione tra spazio, violenza e testimonianza. Forensic Architecture usa gli strumenti dell'architettura, dell'analisi spaziale, della modellazione tridimensionale, delle analisi, delle immagini e dei video per ricostruire eventi di violenza, per rendere visibile ciò che i perpetratori vorrebbero che restasse invisibile e per trasformare le tracce materiali in forme di testimonianza capaci di sfidare le narrazioni ufficiali e così costruire verità pubbliche, anche quando le istituzioni si rifiutano di riconoscerle. Il suo lavoro ci mostra che l'architettura non è mai neutrale. Gli edifici, le strade, i confini, le rovine sono testimoni che possono essere messi nella condizione di parlare se si possiedono gli strumenti giusti per interrogarli, il tempo, la volontà e la capacità. Forensic Architecture ha documentato crimini di guerra e violazioni dei diritti umani in decine e decine di contesti. E il caso palestinese occupa un posto centrale nel loro lavoro, perché Gaza rappresenta l'esempio più estremo e più visibile di come lo spazio possa essere usato come arma di distruzione di massa. Francesca Albanese è relatrice speciale delle Nazioni Unite sulla situazione dei diritti umani nei territori palestinesi occupati. Pochi mesi fa ha pubblicato il rapporto From Economy of Occupation to Economy of Genocide, dove è esposto l'infrastruttura corporativa che sostiene e trae profitto dal progetto coloniale israeliano, nominando 48 attori corporativi, tra cui giganti della tecnologia come Microsoft e Alphabet, produttori di armi, istituzioni finanziarie e università, che attraverso le loro partnership con istituzioni israeliane forniscono strumenti, tecnologie e supporto logistico che alimentano l'uso massiccio della forza contro la popolazione civile palestinese. Insieme, Albanese e Weizman rappresentano due modalità complementari di documentazione e testimonianza di fronte al genocidio in corso a Gaza. Entrambi affrontano la stessa domanda: come si costruisce questa testimonianza? E perché questo dialogo oggi è così rilevante per chi studia architettura? Perché ci ricorda che ogni progetto urbano, ogni tracciato stradale, ogni demolizione, ogni costruzione di muri o di checkpoint è sempre anche un gesto politico che produce o impedisce possibilità di vita. Gaza ci mostra nel modo più brutale possibile che l'architettura può essere usata come strumento di genocidio. La distruzione sistematica di ospedali, scuole, moschee, università, infrastrutture idriche ed elettriche, interi quartieri residenziali non è un effetto collaterale della guerra, ma una strategia deliberata di cancellazione di un popolo attraverso la cancellazione del suo ambiente, e ci mostra anche che documentare questa distruzione, renderla visibile, trasformarla in prova, è un atto architettonico altissimo, nel senso più profondo del termine. Questo è il lavoro che Weizman e Albanese fanno, ciascuno con i propri strumenti disciplinari, ciascuno portando le proprie competenze al servizio della testimonianza e della giustizia. Il loro dialogo di oggi non è un esercizio astratto, ma un confronto tra due pratiche di resistenza epistemica, di esercizio attivo dell'immaginazione, resistenza contro chi vuole che il genocidio rimanga invisibile, innominabile, impunito. Li ringrazio per essere qui oggi e ringrazio voi per essere venuti ad ascoltarli. Lascio ora la parola a loro, affinché possano sviluppare questo dialogo necessario. Palestina libera.
Scusate, solo una comunicazione di organizzazione. Ovviamente questo incontro è un incontro duplice, nel senso noi vorremmo anche sentire e ascoltare le vostre opinioni. Abbiamo programmato degli interventi con gli studenti, alla fine di questo, del dialogo di Francesca Albanese e di Weizman, ci sarà il gruppo Arca che prenderà la parola e poi Claudia Marinetti dei rappresentanti degli studenti. Ovviamente nella seconda, finale è aperta a chiunque vuole intervenire, basta alzare la mano. Per intanto volevo, per motivi organizzativi, segnalarvi questa cosa, quindi quando finisce il dialogo evitiamo di allontanarci, di sentire anche gli studenti. L'altra cosa, mi è stato chiesto di fare una comunicazione che faccio volentieri, che c'è un presidio a piazza Cavour, sotto immagino il tribunale, che riguarda i ragazzi che sono stati arrestati nelle manifestazioni di questi giorni. Sono 100 persone, ovviamente una comunicazione che ognuno può decidere di fare quello che vuole. Grazie ancora e do la parola a Francesca Albanese e Weizman.
Hello.
No, maybe just to say thank you. It's been splendid. I discovered that I'm also a perfect simultaneous translator.
Yes, absolutely perfect.
And I just want to say thank you to the organizers, the faculty, this university, to all of you. I'm still light struck, Professor, by your introduction. It was phenomenal. Yeah. It is one of the most beautiful, meaningful things I've heard in a long time. So just this was worth coming. So thank you so much. And I'm happy to give the floor to the person who was, until this morning, my favorite architect. Now it's hard to say. You need to own it.
Is this true that this is the beginning of the architectural year, no? And we have here MA students, right? Okay, that's fantastic. That's really fantastic opportunity, because it's kind of like we're going to sync us up, no? I mean, and what architecture can do. So yeah, really grateful to be here to speak about the work of forensic architecture. I think you maybe you've heard, but forensic architecture is an architectural office We use architectural design tools. We are like any other architects, only that what we do is reconstruct war crimes. We call our practice counter-forensics because we never work for states. We only work for communities that experience state violence, whether it is in the Mediterranean, facing the brutal Italian migration policy, murderous migration policy, whether it is in France, in Mexico, in Bogota, in all those places where we actually provide files mainly for courts, international and national courts, but also we perceive the importance of evidence as making the truth public. And the idea of making something public, making it political, requires also that we step out of the court, that we understand what the law can do at some situation and understand its limitations. And therefore, forensic architecture works also in exhibitions and we make films. We present our work in activist forums, in citizen tribunals, and many other places. And I want to say that we decided with increased demand for our work. So really the problem that we have is how to choose our cases, because right now when we have established ourselves to a certain extent, worldwide people are asking us to do things. And usually a forensic architecture project it takes us a year to investigate 1 second of eruptive violence. We are working very slowly, very meticulously on reconstruction. So the idea is always how to read within the molecular levels of time, within the split second, the still shot, the still frame, the street corner, the shadows of history. How do you see the history in an instant? What is the long duration of the split second? And because of that diagram where it takes us so long to do so little, we have decided, rather than grow the office and grow and grow and grow, actually to break it apart. And now we are operating under an organization that we founded called the Investigative Commons, with offices all over the world, or not all over, but in many places, including here in Italy. Liminal is working from Bologna and dealing with a lot of issues of migration. But the first of our out of London offices was in the largest first human rights group in the Arab-speaking world, an organization called Al-Haq, the right. And we have founded that office back in 2020, and 2 years after we have founded that office, Al-Haq, together with other Palestinian NGOs, civil society groups, have been declared terrorist organizations by the Israeli Ministry of Defense. So it started asking you what, I think in the introduction you said that territory and terror share a root. But I think what terrorizes the perpetrator, nothing terrorizes the perpetrator more than the truth. And therefore organizations that collect it meticulously with their own communities are targeted. And this is how the door to Al-Haq, and where offices are located, where it looked like on August 2022. A welded sheet of metal. The team came in the morning. This is what they took a photo and they sent it to us in London. And they said, we cannot get into the office. There is a sign on the door declaring us a terrorist organization, declaring the office And here, think about yourselves, an architectural office, including an architectural office inside of that declared as part of a terrorist organization. So I don't know if to take it as a compliment, but I think it's kind of as far as it goes when you think about architectural practice. Luckily, a few days before, we were worried that this is going to happen. And we changed something very simple in the CCTV monitoring of Al-Haq offices. Instead of going into a hard drive, which is always taken by the Israeli occupation forces as they raid, we uploaded it onto a cloud. So we have here a video of how an occupying army visits a human rights organization and an architectural office, breaking into it. Usually you would say when you break into an architectural office, you would break through the floor to see where the Kalashnikovs are and the RPGs, etc. Here they're just looking through files. And that is here, you know, going through files and drawings, and you know, and at the last shot of that video is where they're reaching out to the cupboard with the electricity and taking it off. Of course, they've also stolen the computers with the material on it. With the power invested in me by the emergency regulations and following my declaration of Al-Haq as an illegal association, and given I determine it to be necessary for the security of the area, right? A human rights organization is a threat to the security. I order the immediate closure of this place, and it's keeping it shut. And these are the 6 other groups that have received the similar notices that day. It took literally 4.5 minutes to open the door, and the team was back at work. And we were very busy working at the time because at the request of Shirin Abu Akleh's family, the legendary Palestinian journalist who was murdered just 4 months earlier, she was assassinated by the Israeli army. And this is really how forensic architecture and the Al-Haq Forensic Architecture Office works. We never enter a case, we never take a case unless invited, and particularly unless invited by the family. So the brother of Shirin, Tony Abu Akleh, has asked Al-Haq and Forensic Architecture to investigate it. I think you know the kind of work that we do. We start from material evidence here, 4 bullets in a tree, lodged in a tree that we could identify. And from that, move from material evidence to 3D models. You see what is called photogrammetry. I'm sure all of you know. Using many, many videos, we reconstruct the scene. And finally, we're able to identify not only that it was the army, but exactly from which location she was targeted. Here, just to take you into the fine details of the work, the bullet that hit Shirin Abu Akleh in the head and killed her instantly was kept in a Palestinian medical pathological association, and the Israeli army was running for it. They were raiding, trying to get that bullet. The American administration was also, Shirin had also an American passport, so the FBI was after that bullet, and nobody knew where the bullet is. And you see kind of the role of forensics being kind of at the heart of that kind of militarized attempt to find that piece of evidence, because the bullet is what you need in order to tie the bullet to the individual soldier that pressed the trigger. Every bullet is laced with the information about the gun from which it was shot. Somebody sent a photograph of that bullet. And we were looking at it very carefully. This is what is here on the left. And it had a little bit of green on the top, which allowed us to identify the kind of munition. And from the munition, identify the gun. From the gun, identify the scope and show what was absolutely essential in the case, that the sniper that shot her in the head could have seen very clearly that she was wearing a press vest. That murder happened next to the Jenin refugee camp and was actually a collaboration with the community. Usually, forensic work is defined by being remote, by being impartial, by being outside of the imminent field of conflict. But the principle of forensic architecture is bringing a kind of community investigation. So we had people there measuring and working and reconstructing, collecting the videos, collecting the testimonies, so that we could identify that. So we could show very clearly that she was assassinated. But actually, I want to end up with one thing, and really shows the limitation of analysis where there are no instrument of justice able to actually use them. 4 bullets, just like the bullet that everybody from the FBI to the Israeli Shin Bet to the army was chasing. 4 bullets were actually in the tree. And they will remain in a tree, and they contain exactly the same information. People did not notice that. And when we wanted to do the analysis, people said, oh, we need to take the tree off. We need to cut the tree to get the bullets, and we refused to do it. Until that moment, when justice will be possible for Shirin Abu Akleh and for Palestinians under occupation. So the tree is a kind of an instrument of preserving that evidence for that future that we hope to achieve. It is extremely important to do that. After 7th of October 2023, a year later, the experience of forensic architecture was the first. On the first day, on the 7th of October, 3 of our colleagues in Gaza were killed in a bomb strike. They were part of an organization that is our collaborators called Ein Media. We were working together with them on many or almost all investigations we did in Gaza before. They were performing their duty on October 7th, filming and recording what was happening, what any journalist would do. And sometimes it feels like wearing a press vest, and this is Rushdie al-Sarraj, our closest partner that died or was assassinated actually 2 weeks later, is feeling like you're wearing a target. And I think there is a continuity between the raid on Al-Haq, between the assassination of Shirin Abu Akleh, between the killing of our colleagues from Ein Media, of Rushdie al-Sarraj, because that war is not only, and contemporary wars are not only about destruction and destroying people and things, but it's about the narrative of what that destruction means. It's about the truth of what is happening. I remember a very beautiful quote that a French philosopher, postmodernist, called Lyotard, wrote about the Holocaust. And he said, and really about Holocaust denial. He was speaking about in the 80s, there was kind of reawakening of people that were denying the concentration camp and Auschwitz, etc. And he said, the Holocaust, and by extension genocide, is a violence so total that it does not only destroy, think of it as an earthquake that does not only destroy buildings and cities, but destroying the instruments of measure. It's destroying the Geiger meter by which you can actually register and understand that an earthquake has taken place. And I think that what we are experiencing with the sanctions of dear friends. Al-Haq has now been sanctioned after Francesca, you all know, has been sanctioned. The ICC prosecutors have been sanctioned. Journalists are assassinated. NGOs are, and it goes across the spectrum. Not all of that is lethal violence, but it's the same spectrum. Defunding, deplatforming, all the way to assassination is a way for genocide to erase the traces of genocide. It's a violence so total that destroys the instruments of measure. Mahmoud al-Sarraj, the small brother of Rushdie, was murdered a year after him. Also, a few days after working with us, he was in Gaza and targeted. I want to start with an image that gave us hope in the winter, during last winter, when ceasefire was announced and Palestinians were going back home north of Wadi Gaza. The picture, what you see here in this image, is a small bridge in a coastal route called Al-Rashid Road, going north. The little stream that you see here will become extremely important in my lecture. It's called Wadi Gaza. It's winter, so it has some water. At any other moment, it would be a dry riverbed. But it's one of the most important geographic markers of the area, and somehow it is the instrument that connects geography, environment, and this genocide, Wadi Gaza. Palestinians are going back home. The aim of this genocide, in my opinion, and it's not like it's based on documents released within Israel's ministries. It's based on statement. It's based on an analysis of patterns of conducts of the Israeli occupation forces as they conduct the genocide. The aim of that genocide was to empty Gaza of Palestine. The genocide has failed, right? It has produced enormous amount of misery, enormous amount of destruction, but Palestinians are not expelled. And this image shows the kind of perseverance of people, what they call the tzumud, going back and to their homes, whoever survived that Holocaust genocide in Gaza, most of the people, the absolute majority, survived it in Gaza. And that's a huge thing to remember, that as a strategic project, the genocide has failed. And this is why it is important to show images like that, because what you see here are thousands of pages, A4 pages. They're drifting through the wind. They are everywhere dropped over Gaza City and the environment. And these are, given, if you remember what I said, the strategic aim of the genocide is to expel Palestinians out of Gaza, out of Palestine. Amongst the most lethal things that fell on Gaza, right? You think that the most lethal things are the big bombs. Words written on paper have been actually the kind of instrument by which this genocide has been perpetrated. Looking like snowflakes, falling onto a devastated city, filling the sky, falling on the ruins of people's homes, telling people where to go. Israel claims that these are actually manifestations of its care for Palestinian civilians. Which army would tell the people before its attack to leave and go to a safe area? But by collecting all those notes, we could see them actually not as, a kind of a humanitarian gesture, but what Francesca also called a humanitarian camouflage, or we call humanitarian violence. So violence of expulsion, camouflage, as care for the law. In this message, the first of those messages that came from the air, I think you see the principle of the genocide in action. A map of Gaza without any cities, without any roads, without any villages, without any place location, a completely abstract outline of the Gaza Strip. One thing is drawn in it. And again, it's nothing that is man-made. It's that river that I showed you before, Wadi Gaza, that stream, and two arrows pushing people south of it. I think that many people outside of Palestine heard that there is a wadi in Gaza for the first time when people were expelled beyond it, if even. My friends in Gaza tell me that their experience of the wadi is really like rolling the window up to keep the smell of sewage when they're driving to Han Yunis from Gaza City. But that area and that stream is incredibly important historically. Yesterday, I was speaking about the fact that Zionism did not begin as a Jewish national movement. Zionism began as a Christian theological one. And at the end of the 19th century, where that sort of revival of biblical travel to Palestine occurred, a cartography, an entire cartography of the place was put into motion. So Dutch and German, American and British travelers drew the maps of Palestine. But where did Palestine end? There was this was imperial. It was under the Ottoman Palestine. It was part of Greater Syria under the Ottoman Empire. The most detailed map of those proto-Christian Zionists is the Palestine Exploration Fund map from the end of the 19th century. And it ends in Wadi Gaza, right? There is nothing, when we speak about the white part of the map, is everything south of Wadi Gaza. The only word written in that parched paper is Arab el-Tarabin, or the territory of the Tarabin, Palestinian Bedouin tribe that lives in that part. So that is Wadi Gaza. And when you overlay all the expulsion orders of Israel over that old cartography, you see as if something has emerged from the cartographic repressed of Zionism, because the expulsion of Palestinians initially south of Wadi Gaza was the expulsion out of historic Palestine into the desert. And the desert begins. That is the reason that the map is like that. Now, think about the map. Imagine, I don't have an image here, but think about how the Levant is organized, the coastline is organized north-south, and then you have North Africa, which goes east-west. And Gaza is like a hinge where the north-south coast start turning slowly to the east-west coast. That means that hinge and that turn means that the clouds that would otherwise come from over the Mediterranean and irrigate Palestine's sort of northern plain do not come south of Gaza. And the desert falls very sharply. The end of Palestine for those cartographers was the end of the fields. And every traveler to Palestine recorded the same experience, because those travelers came through Alexandria, they went along northern Sinai, they enter Palestine in Gaza, and they all record that kind of awe at the turning of a monochromatic desert into the green field. And actually, there is quite a sharp transition there that has been now weaponized in the other direction. On the same day that Israel sent its first, I showed you those leaflets falling, a kind of a ministry, a government ministry, their plan has been leaked. And they said it quite clearly. The best outcome out of that war that we now have an opportunity to do is to send Palestinians to Egypt, i.e. send Palestinians to the desert, past the borders of Palestine. And even they say in a clear way, that need to be presented as a humanitarian measure, right? The expulsion, the exodus, as a kind of humanitarian move. And then when we started looking, so each one of those patches on this map, and it's kind of moving relatively fast, is our collection of another evacuation order. So yellow is where people should go along the arrow. And you would see that everybody was concentrated initially in Rafah, along the Egyptian border. If you say, if that was a military campaign, which military force would not try to circle its enemies? That is the ABC of military strategy. Well, you go from both sides, you trap people inside, etc. They wanted to expel them out. Egypt held the line, and it was Egyptian policy really since 1948. No Palestinian refugees in our territory. There is no Palestinian refugee camp in Egypt. They are in Syria, they're in Jordan, they're in Lebanon, of course, but not in Egypt. And that was the most decisive. And this is where it started, and this is where it ended. They didn't let people through. Desertification is not only the mobilization of the desert as an instrument of killing in that genocide, and I'll speak about it also in the history of genocide. The desert as that place where conditions of life do not exist, the archetypal place of where conditions of life do not exist, and the destruction of condition of life is one of the most important prohibitions in the Genocide Convention. It's not the only way. Israel has rolled the desert into Gaza. What we are experiencing as architects is a kind of destruction that I've never seen. And, I've been working on the Syrian civil wars in many other places worldwide. We've never seen that type of destruction. It's a type of destruction that erases the first centimeters or even the first half a meter of the surface. Now, as architects, you know that the surface is the operating system of a society. It's where the division between public and private, between home, ownership, parks, etc., all the logic of society is inscribed on the surface. The way that this kind of violence has been undertaken through a principle that I call ungrounding, an attack on the ground itself, is the manifestation of that genocide. So that kind of moonscape that has been produced in Gaza has been the signature of expulsion. And they say again and again, every area that the Israeli army is moving through, it is ungrounding so that no one would be able to come back, not even to identify where they are. There is a form of torture used by the occupation forces. They take Palestinians, beyond all other physical tortures. They tie their, put something on their eyes, and they drive them to where their home has been. And then they remove it, and all they see is a desert in front of them, that kind of ungrounded space. And that is a kind of psychological way, completely also, all our identity is somehow grounded with a familiarity with a particular area, where that area is completely destroyed, not only destroyed, beyond recognition. There is another form. We're not talking about war. We are talking here about a certain terraforming. And the architecture that Israel has built, think about the genocide as two things: acts of destruction and acts of construction. The construction, military construction, the entire infrastructure that Israel built into the Gaza Strip is made of the same material that it was destroyed. It's the rubble of Palestinian life, of Palestinian cities, moving with bulldozers and piled into an artificial landscape. Gaza is relatively flat. Military warfare is fought along topographies. The bulldozers have actually turned the territory from solid to gelatinous liquid medium that actually got reshaped. And they have built mountains as towers, and they've built the piled earth as walls, and the entire architectural vocabulary of military design has been achieved through earth berms, through piling those. This is the courtyard of Al-Shifa Hospital, one of the greatest miracles of the medical profession in Palestine. It's not even a hospital, it's a medical complex that we're offering so much services to the communities. Again, everywhere the army goes, the surface liquefies. They take the desert out of under the paving, under the pavement stone, and reshape it. And here, the courtyard of the hospital turning into mass grave. The murder of the medics in March 2025 that we now investigate with the Red Crescent, with the Palestinian Red Crescent, has been undertaken on a place. And this is the meaning of that murder. On that place, Israel has constructed a landscape. Those medics have entered into a construction site. And on it, they've built one of the most cruel, on the same place where the medics were murdered, one of the cruelest instruments in the architecture of genocide, those feeding stations where they snipe at people. Everything is built out of earth. So these are kind of the typologies of areas that were previously inhabited, turning into, and you see in this image that my friend here, Marco Ferrari, has helped me collect. One architecture turns into the other. You see the old architecture, you see the traces of buildings, and you see how it is risen up to, and into that kind of architectural waves. I call it an earth storm. It's exactly the earth rises, fall as waves on people. People drown in earth. There are about 11,000 people unaccounted for, buried in deep craters and under those earth berms everywhere in Gaza. Here is the principle in which it works. Look at this green agricultural zone. This is a farm of a friend of ours, Abu Sufia. And here is the process of desertification and terraforming that kind of goes in and unground we need to understand it. It's not only destruction, it's reconstruction. The flattening of the surface, the creation of topography, the drawing of new roads is like drawing a sketch with a finger over a dusty windscreen in your car, right? It's almost like the first sketch on a contour of a geography of settler colonial occupation, going slowly, step by step. Each one is something different. These are camps. These are kind of almost like military villages made out of the destruction of Palestinian life. So you see in this image, again made by Marco, is that you see the built fabric of Gaza giving shape to that waves that are coming, earth waves that are coming from the external inwards. This is one of the most important archaeological sites, ancient Gaza, a city that the Hellenic cultures that live there, called Anthedon, has been turning into divisionary headquarter, and archaeological earth has been piled into that. So we're talking about cemeteries, and we so carefully reconstructed that architectural site because it's gone. So giving that attention, giving that care to those traces are extremely important, because they do not exist now anywhere else than in the rubble of the berms that are covering them. Maybe future archaeologists would do an archaeology and would look in the rubble mound itself and pick up traces, fragments of that archaeology that is really a magnificent site dug throughout the 90s by Palestinian and French archaeologists in next to the refugee camp of Al-Shati. In fact, it was kids from the Al-Shati refugee camp that first came with, they found little coins, and they went to the Ministry of Antiquity and said, we think there's something here. And people said, no, don't worry, this is that. And until they realized that actually those coins were washed in winter through, this is before the genocide. Wadi Gaza has the biggest basin in the geography of Palestine. You know, sometimes we draw rivers in a very stupid way, just like a line, a blue line. Rivers are huge drainage basin. And this is the area before the Nakba, so before 1947-48. This is Wadi Gaza. In dark is the basin of it. And in yellow is a map that was produced of Palestinian Bedouin villages. And you could see that they were living all along the tributaries. Different tribes and clans along different tributaries. And in 1948, in fact, at the very end, almost like the heartbeat of the last heartbeat of the war under which the ethnic cleansing of Palestine was performed. So between October and December 1948, Israel has actually expelled all those Palestinian Bedouins down the tributaries, down connecting into the larger tributaries and into Gaza. So all those people were expelled, and this is something that also need to be known. Roughly half of the Palestinian refugees in Gaza are Bedouin Palestinians. And there is a lot of the more tribal culture that has been brought into that, and it's very important in that context. So all that area has been colonized. These are the tributaries, the higher tributaries of Wadi Gaza. This is work I've done with Fazal Sheikh several years ago. There's still cemeteries that remained, old cemeteries of those people that were expelled. And these cemeteries are anchors for return. People return to the cemetery, they set their tents or prefabricated home next to it, and we think of return as something that occurs in the future. Returns happening all the time. Palestinians are all the time, those that can, those that remain, let's say, in what's called 48 Palestine, in the area that is under Israeli jurisdiction, they're returning all the time to places they were evicted from. And that village called Al-Araqib has been destroyed and rebuilt about 250 times. People return, the bulldozers destroy. You could see how this is in the desert, the planting of trees. These are kind of dams for the planting, are built exactly on traces of those Palestinian Bedouins that are now the refugees in Gaza. That erasure, that ungrounding, that used to be a community, and what you see is a day's work, the traces of a day's work of a bulldozer. It goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. 5 o'clock, has to go home. That's what you've done during that day. You've erased the village completely. It's the desert is taking it over, no, in that way. This is not in Gaza. This is in the Nakab, in the what's Israel called the Negev, next to Beersheba. It's the same processes that are continuing in different intensities. The genocide is a peak of violence, but all the vocabulary of actions, everything that is happening has, happened throughout the history of Israel's settler colonization in Gaza. I'm going to skip that a little bit. I was talking a lot about soil and earth today, and I think another extremely important way for us to connect to the fragile ecology of the Gaza Strip, hanging on to the threshold of the desert, is that it's a meeting point also between two kinds of soils. You have sand being washed from the sea. The sand comes all the way from the Ethiopian Eritrean plain. Granite, rocks break into that kind of, sand dust, traffic 7,000 kilometers down the Nile, go through the Mediterranean with the waves and washed onto the shores of Gaza, meeting on the other side the most fertile earth coming down Wadi Gaza, the basin of Wadi Gaza. So you have the most fertile clay coming from east to west, and the most barren sand coming from west to east, meeting halfway through the Gaza Strip. Life in this area depended on grounding the sand in place, damming it so it doesn't cover. Look at those ancient maps, how life hangs on to the edge of unlivable zones. Damming the sand so it doesn't cover the agricultural field has been the condition of life in Gaza. Okay, so now here is a map, an aerial image of Gaza from the 1960s, when you still see very clearly the two kinds of soil, and you see the sand along the coast. This is Wadi Gaza. This area receives no rain. And so south of Wadi Gaza, that area is receives no rain. And here is the coastal dunes. And guess where all Palestinians ended up? In the sand dunes of the Mawasi. It's really difficult to even imagine that there is a soil environmental component to this genocide, but effectively it maps onto it absolutely brilliantly. People were expelled from 500 millimeter rain north of Wadi Gaza to under 200 millimeter rain per year south of Wadi Gaza into the desert, and from the alluvial soils, from the agricultural soil, onto the sand. These arrows are each one collected meticulously from each one of the evacuation order that Israel is giving, the humanitarians one. And you look at this place and you think, isn't it like the same principle of settler colonial genocide that we've seen, where reservation, think about the word reservations, another word that signifies care, preserving something, which have been throughout 5, let's say, centuries of colonization in the Americas, have been the instrument of ethnic cleansing. No? The reservation, always on a worse land, always connected apart. We have the same principle here of settler colonial genocide. Forensic architecture started to work for the South Africa legal team at the ICJ back in the winter of 2024, several months after it began. And it was exactly these principles, this deep historical reading beyond all the contemporary, we map every attack on hospital and destruction of agricultural field, etc. But I wanted to give you today a little bit of a longer perspective. This is actually the historical files. We were taking, this is the ambassador, the South African ambassador to The Hague, bringing to The Hague the prosecution files. And they included a huge amount of historical materials speaking about the history of Gaza, showing that we don't have simply a new reality that has begun after October 2023, but a continuity of settler colonial violence. We were showing how this is a map from Namibia, the very same principle. So Namibia was colonized by Imperial Germany as Southwest Africa at the end of the 19th century. The mechanism of murder of the Over-Herero people in the same way was pushing them from their agrarian fields into the desert. The desert is featured also in the Armenian genocide, where the Ottoman military has pushed Armenians from areas that were cultivated into the Great Syrian Desert. The desert is a kind of both desert, pushing to the desert on the one hand, but then desertification, as I show you, artificial military desertification is another very important mechanism of the genocide. I'm going to skip that, and I'm going to continue until I'm being told to stop. Don't be polite. Okay, where are we now? Genocide. Yeah, so I can speak a little bit more about the Namibian genocide. We worked for about 5 years with Nama and Over-Herero communities, again, at their invitation. They're finding themselves at a very important historical nexus. So the genocide in Namibia took place between 1904 and 1908 with a clear declaration of intent by the military commander of the German forces, the Schutztruppen, called von Trotta, extermination order, which is very important in order to actually achieve a genocide decision. It was part of a process of land grab. If I had the map, imagine a map of Namibia showing you before the genocide, 2% of Namibia was actually colonized by German farmers. After the genocide, the area that they cultivated grew 20-fold. Settler colonial genocide are always to do with replacing one pattern of indigenous people, erasing it, and building on top of that land the pattern of the perpetrator. That's already very clear in Lemkin's conceptualization of genocide in his sort of book, a book that he's written during the Second World War. Settler colonial genocide is what we're seeing. Settler colonial genocide is about environments. And this is why I'm actually being quite, I'm taking you away from the social media and the videos that you see into a little bit kind of like, what is the logic of it that exists under the surface? But of course, in forensic architecture, we mapped tens of thousands of incidents. We verified all of them. And what we had to look for is the relation between them. And asking ourselves, for example, what is the relation between agricultural destruction? Here are areas that have been cultivated by Palestinians and destroyed by Israel, and attack on aid. So a genocide is not really about listing up the atrocities. Is not, yet another nurse, another doctor, another child, another full family that has been erased. It's not a list of those. It is a way to actually tell a story. And the story is being told through the relation between those different acts of atrocities. So you destroy agriculture, you destroy Palestinian food sovereignty. Palestinians could not manufacture the food they need to eat. There's no agriculture. There's no fisheries. Everything along the coastline has been destroyed. If at the same time you also attack the aid coming in, restrict the aid, kill aid workers, you are producing in the relation, not in the act, but in the relation between acts, you're producing an engineered famine, right? You're using famine again. I think the meta concept, the meta principle, the meta strategy of the genocide is expulsion. You produce famine to expel, to concentrate, to push people to where you want them to be. I'm gonna skip a little bit more. I want to go back to one of the villages that existed in what is called the Gaza envelope, so that we see that we're talking about the Gaza Strip, but even the term Gaza Strip is an instrument of violence. Gaza was never a strip. The strip is the way in which Gaza was kind of put under siege after the Nakba. And the people that were living there, the Palestinian Bedouin families, prominent among those, a common friends of Francesca and I, both Hassan and Salman Abu Sita, Tarabins, from the Wadi Gaza basin, whose village, Ma'in Abu Sita, was just outside of what became the Gaza Strip. The village was destroyed, ungrounded in the same way. The means of ungrounding for Zionists after the Nakba was with plows. Oh, well, you know that. It's Rome, no? You mark borders with plows here and erase the cities of those defeated by running the plows over the bones of the dead, over the cities, etc. Cross-plowing in order the plow teeth go into the brain, upturn the earth, and destroy the operating principle of inhabitation, what is inscribed on the surface. So here is Ma'in Abu Sita in its beautiful, sitting on its land. We found the aerial images, and here is, you would see 1956, after people were expelled out of the Wadi Gaza basin, you see the settlements that are being built. These are kibbutz settlements that have been built right on the Abu Sita territory. This is the Salman's father's home. You saw Salman, the old person that we work with in that, and this is how it is after the Nakba. This is the school, and it turned into a cemetery for the settlers. And here is one of the kibbutz settlements built on their lands. So you see the kind of the replacement of one geography with another. We spend so much time from the aerial images and from memory reconstructing the indigenous agriculture, organized like a clockwork around this sort of 8-branch crossroad. A lot of the area before the Nakba was cultivated with barley. Barley can actually grow at the desert threshold. It can deal with salinity of the soil. It can deal with little amount of water. Gaza was through the port of Gaza. Most of the barley that was used for the beer industry of England, for the pubs, went to Liverpool, was exported, was actually from that very area. Incredibly rich. The idea that Zionists make the desert bloom is kind of laughable. And here, what you see here, again, I don't have a lot of time to go through it, is one of the things that we do in forensic architecture called situated testimony. We build models together with survivors. We understand that modeling is a kind of mnemonic tool. It allows you to recall. You walk through an area and you reconstruct it, and the model actually builds your memory. The memory builds the model builds the memory in that respect. Here is the location of that village. They were taking the old British map and simply drawing over them. And you see that act of erasure and ungrounding happening very early on. Nothing that started in October now. the erasure of one geography and its replacement with the other. And here, the kibbutz settlement that is built on this ruin is built according to the typology, the classic typology of military fortification, the Pentagon. Here is the line. There was no fence around Gaza after the Nakba. They have simply carved a line with a tractor and a plow. Like the first borders, the Pomerum, or whatever you call it here, of Rome. On this side, the refugees with a dense field. On this side, the settlers with their... And in this image, when we... On this side, on the 2025 side of the image, this is the way we are working, identifying the Israeli architecture that is imposed on the landscape, everything in yellow. Because we were working with Salman Abu Sitta on reconstructing his village, we kind of shifted. It was by chance. One of my colleagues, Samane, shifted between a 1945 British aerial image of Salman Abu Sitta area and the contemporary one. And we saw that the destruction of that part of Gaza came from a small military base that started on the ruins of the village that was destroyed in 1948, showing that that path of destruction is not only a line in space, but a line through time that connects the entire mechanism of settler colonization from the Nakba onwards. One last thing before I let go. This redesign of Gaza through genocide is unfortunately being reflected now in all plans that we see for the reconstruction of Gaza. What Israel did not manage to achieve in 2 years of indiscriminate bombing, with the destruction of all medical facilities, all fields, all schools, mosques and hospitals, cities, etc., it is planning now to achieve through architecture. To design something, look at, this is on the right is the Egyptian master plan. This is what is being promoted by a coalition of Arab states, supported by the EU, supported obviously now by Trump. That is actually from March 2025, but it comes back into play. Look at this plan, you're architects. Here in yellow, you see everything that Israel has destroyed during the genocide. This, in the Egyptian plan, is open green area. They have built the reconstruction of Gaza on the footprint of its destruction. The raid routes, these are the famous corridors along which Israel is raiding into Gaza. They exist also in the Egyptian plan. Israel would have very easy life entering again. They've produced an architecture of total surveillance and control. But not only that, in order to build entire cities, that's also what Trump and his kind of like crazy delusionary plans are. People see demolition zones, people see ungrounded surface, and it attracts a lot of real estate sharks. But the way to do it, the way they're thinking to do it, is to fence up entire areas, turn them into construction site, and build them, because it's the only efficient way to do it. You cannot have people while you rebuild. Rebuilding will necessitate the construction of those concentration camps, of those kind of like refugee cities in Gaza while that work is going on. And the fear is that if we do not resist it, if we do not point to it, if we do not protest those plans done over Palestinians' heads without consultation with Palestinian researchers, built on the mass graves of Palestinians in Gaza, architecture will become the continuation of genocide by other means. Thank you.
Yes. I think so.
So I think that, first of all, thank you very much. I mean, it's true that there is a lot that I know through this presentation because I've used it. I've used Eyal's work to understand this genocide, to have the facts, to have the explanation of the facts, but also, as he was saying, to understand the logic, helping people moving from social media under the surface. But yeah, there is something that I hadn't heard yet, and in fact, I was already telling someone else that they should invite you to explain, not to explain what you were just saying. Again, this is another compliment for what I'm saying. I'm against the current plan. I struggle calling it peace plan because there is no peace without justice. But for a number of reasons that I will unpack. But as this argument is now sinking in that whatever has not, the erasure that has not been achieved through the genocide will be achieved through the reconstruction. And this is really scary. So, but let me go back to the thoughts I have gathered, collected as Eyal was speaking. I didn't prepare anything because, in fact, what I had prepared to do was to complement and add my own reading to his presentation. Eyal, you started saying, but also I would like to acknowledge how sick you are. And despite the fact that you're very sick, you have delivered a master class. So thank you. It's interesting how you presented your work as counter-forensic, as challenging somewhat preconstrued. You mentioned state narratives, but somewhat. This is also what I do through my work. Mm-hmm. For those of you who do not know what I do, I mean, a number of you might know me as the Special Rapporteur on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, but what I do is to document and report the violations of international law that take place in the occupied Palestinian territory. So the little that remains of Palestine that Israel occupied in 1967, 57 years of occupation that an international tribunal says it's illegal. Israel needs to remove its troops, dismantle the colonies, and stop exploiting and using resources, land, water, and the rest from the occupied Palestinian territory, repair for what it has done, compensate the Palestinians for the damage, and allow return. And in the face of this, the narrative of the state is something else. So this, I have to, in the context of a prolonged occupation, my role, my mandate, is to document and report to the United Nations twice a year about the status of international law. And it has always been a pretty depressing endeavor, a pretty difficult, challenging, spiritually toning endeavor, because it's heavy to live under apartheid, and it's heavy to see people living under apartheid. And then belonging to a part of the world that denies those crimes, that doesn't see the Palestinians as humans. And it has always been difficult because 2 years ago, it was so hard, so hard. I'm not saying to have a room filled with wonderful listening people. It was even difficult to have a room to talk about Palestine in universities, because this is the first form of violence that has been done to the Palestinian people, and a contribution to the erasure, not having space in universities to talk about Palestine. And now it's even heavier because you see all this. And what I've seen, the destruction of the space, I've concentrated my gaze, my eye, my capacity of looking and reading and using legal lenses, because this is what I say when my work complements what Eyal does, because I explain what has happened, and this is why it's important to understand the logic through its legal meaning. And I say, this is a crime because, and it's so difficult when you know all this, when you collect the testimonies, when you count the dead day by day, and you see the human toll of this, not just those who are no longer with us, but those who remain, those who have spent 2 years sleeping in the street, moving from place to place in the ordeal of continuous displacement, being starved, being forced to collect the remains of their beloved one in bags, not giving decent burial to their beloved ones, which in some cultures is even more devastating. In some religions is more devastating than others, because if the body is not buried, the soul will not be able to find peace. So imagine what it is this for the Palestinians. And this is why for me it's so difficult, especially in this country, to be in context explaining what it is and being challenged while there is not even information about that. So I really don't know. This is why sometimes you are asking me why I stormed out of a TV studio. It's not my habit. I'm not a rude person. I really think, and 700 days of genocide with me sitting patiently and still explaining the genocide prove that at least I have some patience. I have some nerve. I cannot be told not to be patient. But it's enough of denialism. I cannot stand this anymore, because this violence is still something that screams inside the witnesses. So what I've done this year is I've also tried to challenge the narrative, which is something I shouldn't be doing, because my job is just to monitor, document, report, make recommendations. That's it. I shouldn't be convincing anyone, but there is an obligation to prevent these crimes. There is an obligation to prevent genocide, to act upon what Raphael Lemkin called the precursors of genocide. And I regret not to have known genocide in advance, because had I known what genocide really is, what settler colonial genocide really is, I would have understood that what Israel has done to the Palestinians from its very foundation, even before being created as a state, was the precursor of a genocide. The segregation, the displacement, the replacement, the extrajudicial killings, the mass arrest and detention, and the treatment of children. Had I read the Nuremberg trials and the reports of Nazi officials answering the prosecutors, asking them, yeah, but why did you kill all these people? Because they were a threat. They were a threat to our existence, our superior race. But the kids, the children, even the children. And then as the prosecutor and the Nazi official says, yes, because they will grow into a threat and they will take revenge against us. Had I known all this, I would have connected the dots. I would understand the line that linked the past to the present, as Eyal links the destruction of Salman Abu Sitta's land and his tribe to what has happened to Gaza. But there is a continuity, and even if I didn't understand immediately that it was a genocide, a settler colonial genocide, so even something so anachronistic, I did see a line between the destruction that was taking place in Gaza 1 week since the beginning of the offensive revengeful offense that Israel launched against Gaza after the massacres on October 7. I did see the full-on destruction that Israel had unleashed with the sort of messages that were given to the population, with the fact that a war for security reason had been announced, led me to say, and it was the 14th of October 2023, to say to the international community, watch out, because Israel, under the fog of war, is going to unleash another ethnic cleansing campaign, as it did in 1947-49. Well, the taking the land also meant the expulsion of 750,000 Palestinians from their homes and their lands, for them never to return. And in which was accompanied by the destruction, this ungrounding, the destruction of 500 villages and towns, and the erasure of the massacres that took place. And then in 1967, same thing, when Israel occupied the Gaza Strip, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, same thing, 350,000 Palestinians displaced, for them never to be allowed to return. Many of them were already refugees from 1947-49, and destruction of cities, neighborhoods, refugee camps. When I saw that they had started to destroy with the geographical precision that Eyal was saying, bombing from north to south, I thought, this might be it. And also I was linking something that they were saying. I mean, I was reminding myself of this, of what was the trigger for me to understand. There was Danny Danon, an Israeli former ambassador, who said, who's still in function, is an Israeli official, who said, don't worry, the usual Israeli reassurances. Don't worry, we are going to give the people of Gaza everything they need. They will be moved to the south, Sinai, where they will get homes, education, and everything they need to live. This is what I said, okay, this is it. This is going to be the completion of the ethnic cleansing, what is Eyal was presenting as erasure. So without even knowing, we were already seeing the same thing at the same time. And this is where then he has analyzed what was happening to the space and the people within the space. And I was trying to give a legal reading of those facts and developments. I produced a report in March 2024 called Anatomy of a Genocide, and the timing was interesting because this followed of a few weeks the work that Forensic Architecture had presented, which was the first mapping of this genocide, connecting the dots. It was before cartography, but I think it was the beginning of cartography of genocide that you can find, all these you can find on Forensic Architecture's website. But I did apply the law. So what is genocide? Genocide is, I often say, don't read the fact that is called the crime of crimes as if it was at the top of a hierarchy. It's not. You need to see international crimes on a same level. War crimes are violations of the law of war, so they take place in war. You cannot destroy hospitals, you cannot target civilians, you cannot starve people in a context of war, you cannot use famine as a weapon. So these are violations. The fact that you commit those violations is the crime itself. What did you want to achieve? Doesn't matter. You may commit violations, that's it. There are rules in war, you need to have a military necessity to carry out each operation, not the entire operation, each projectile, each missile, each act that you undertake needs to be justified by military necessity. It is to be proportionate because it's clear it's a war, so you might cause some damage to civilian infrastructure, to civilian life. So the first thing is the principle of proportionality. And you need to take precautions. You need to make sure that you will not cause civilian damage, because this is the greatest achievement of the post-World War II era, where civilian victims were 5 or 10% of the entire people killed in war. Now they are about 95%. So much so we have progressed. But so basically, clearly Israel has committed violations of the law of war. Then there is another category of crimes. It's crimes against humanity. It's crimes that you can commit both in times of war or peace, but generally you don't need a war. And a crime against humanity, it's not more serious. It's just another thing. It's another crime. It's a criminal conduct that you direct against the civilian population, and it's characterized by the intent. So you need to target the civilian population through systematic and widespread attack. So if you target a hospital as a war crime, if the attacks on the hospital, it's poof, 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 it seems that clearly you are destroying all the hospitals. That is not just a war crime, it's also systematic and widespread destruction of hospitals. So the thing is, genocide is something more, and it's difficult to prove, but you know why? Because it should be difficult to commit a genocide in 2024. This is in 2023, because there are so many norms that are there to make layers and layers and layers of protection. Everything has failed clearly, because this is a textbook case of genocide. Genocide consists, this is the law, it's very simple, even a child understands it, seriously. Genocide is the intent to destroy a group in full or in part as such. And by destruction, it's understood the physical and biological destruction. Although it's said, even the destruction of the cultural sphere, this is said in the interpretation of the Genocide Convention, can be understood as a circumstantial element corroborating the genocidal intent. But however, so just to say the destruction of churches, for example, might not necessarily be seen as a genocidal act. However, can complement the others. The destruction of hospitals, oh yes, because you deprive people from the means to survive, especially in a situation of war. And so I will get back to this. But so genocide is the intent to destroy a group in total or in part as such. That as such is one of the most important things you need to retain to understand the genocide, because it doesn't matter who you are as such, in quanto tali. It doesn't matter who you are. You can be a child, you can be an elderly, you can be in a wheelchair, you can be sleeping, you can be standing, as long as you belong to that group that has been targeted for destruction. Because this is the intent, is the determination to destroy. Is not, and this is the confusion. The confusion. Intent doesn't mean something that is hidden inside my heart. The reason why, it's not the intent. This is a motive. It's something else, and doesn't make any difference what the motive is. You might want to commit genocide because you hate me, you hate my people, or because you want to stay in power, because you want to punish me. Doesn't matter. The moment you make that determination, this is already punishable. And the moment you explain that, you encourage that, this is already a crime punished elsewhere. It's instigation to commit genocide. This is even before genocide starts. But the fact that you say, these people are snakes, these people are cockroaches, they should be exterminated, as it was said about the Palestinians already many, many years ago. This is already genocidal incitement. You see the resentment I have toward my category, because we have been blind in the face of genocidal incitement against the Palestinian through and through. They had already been dehumanized. But however, in order to commit genocide, you don't only need the spoken words, you need to have the capacity to commit a genocide, and you need to have the reality. After a week, it was already clear that it was genocide, because they had said it. We will bring Gaza back to the Middle Age. Voila. We will punish them. It's a nation of people responsible. No one is innocent in Gaza, not even the children. And the journalist asked one of the Israeli politicians who made this statement, but the kids in the neonatal units. And the Israeli politician got extremely annoyed. How do you dare talking about those children, those babies in the incubators, in the face of what they've done to us on the October 7? Now, you need to know that mass killing, extermination, especially in colonial times, have been justified as counterinsurgency. And this was the case, the reason why I triggered the example of the Nama and Herero. The Nama and Herero people in Namibia were fed up of being subjugated by the Germans, and they were tired of having their land stolen and being mistreated and treated like objects, and so they revolted, and rightly so. And they were genocided. And so it's something intrinsic in the nature of genocide for the genocider always to have an excuse. The threat, imminent or real, it's the trigger, might be the trigger. If the population is tamed, probably there is no reason. But people resist oppression, and this has been the history of genocides. The Aboriginal people in Australia tried to resist in the name of the dozens of thousands of years of their life in Australia, tried to resist European settler colonizers, and many of them perished, and that there was a genocide achieved. The Native Americans from Canada to North America, I mean, the United States were born, it's not that it's a young country with a young history. No, it's a country which was born out of 520 genocides. And this is the country that is now helping the commission of another genocide. And I like to remind the people of my generation that we have learned the denial of the genocide of the Native Americans through the movies of John Wayne. This is the justification of the genocide, the banality of evil, turning genocides into a story, consumption, feathers. I mean, so there is something common to the other settler colonial genocides, and this is for the land, taking the land. But I also think now it's also to erase the Palestinians as such. The more I live through this, the more I see what's happening, not just to the space Palestine, but to the space Middle East. Bless you. The more I think that the Palestinians has been erased because they are the resistance to Greater Israel, not just as a physical project of borders, of expansion of physical borders, but expansion of domination in the region. Don't think of Greater Israel as I've always seen it, the expansion of the physical borders so as to encapsulate the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, which is the reason why I was saying 1 year ago, Israel is advancing so fast, this genocide. And with Eyal, we were discussing and say, you see, there is also the leaking out of the genocide in the West Bank because the destruction of hospitals and the killing, and it's already happening, and the torture of Palestinian prisoners is there. So there is some genocidal destructive element there as well. But the thing is that I do believe that if we give a meaning to the map, as Eyal says, you architect, but I would say geographers as well. If you look at the map that Israel often displays, the map of Greater Israel, if we don't see it as an expansion of physical borders, which would take probably decades, if ever, what if it was not about physical borders, but just domination, annihilation of the other, by mixing this toxic combination, by using this toxic combination of military power, financial power, and the power of the algorithms that are all there, and using Israel as a way to destabilize the region and expand this border. You see that Greater Israel is already happening, because Iraq, Libya, Syria, Lebanon, all the places that would pose a challenge to Israel, and through Israel to US domination in the region, have all been removed. This is why I say, yes, space is important, but space cannot be understood just as something physical. Today there is, especially in the virtual world, which is parallel to our real world we live in, but this is also where the battle happens. This is where something is being decided, and we don't even have all the instruments and the mindset to understand what's happening. But moving back from the digression and to genocide. So genocide is difficult. I was saying it's difficult to prove, which should be difficult to commit. But here it is. Acts of killing members of the group as such. I mean, Palestinians have been slaughtered, and it's civilians mostly. Even the Israeli army says 15 out of 16 are civilians. Although the concept of combatant that the Israeli army uses is much broader than what is the concept under international law. And then the infliction of serious physical and mental harm. 10,000 kids amputated, 10,000 kids amputated without anesthesia. Why? Because they had no medication. Let's not talk about the others. Already in March 2024, there were 17,000 orphans. There were already 500 families, 5 generations, which had been erased from earth. This is the human face of this tragedy. And then the acts of torture. Palestinians have been raped to death in Israeli jails. Why don't we talk about that? Do you understand why sometimes I cannot stay seated and discuss with flat earthists? I cannot. I terrapiattisti. Today I cannot. So it's not a sign of disrespect to anyone. It's just preservation of my mental sanity. And yes, I'll wrap up. No, and so just let me finish this. So acts of the destruction, the creation of conditions of life calculated to destroy. Voila, I don't need to add anything to what Eyal said. But two things: humanitarian camouflage. Israel has used language of international law, evacuation orders, safe areas, humanitarian corridors, the Casa Humanitarian Foundation, voluntary migration to distract us. And now the last language, the last word that is used to linearly take us away from any possibility to preserve what remains of Palestinian life in Palestine is peace. We cannot have peace. We cannot have peace without justice. And this is why I tell myself as a European, as an Italian, and I say the same to our fellow Germans, we cannot stay silent, despite whatever our professions are, whatever our urgent needs. Everyone as he or she can, everyone as he or she knows, we must stop this, because this is an opportunity for redemption. It's karmic of what our grandparents or grandparents somewhat altogether have let happen to our fellow Jewish people, fellow nationals, just because Jewish. And I always remind people, the Holocaust didn't happen, didn't end, and didn't finish in the concentration camps. The final solution, it's something that it was the tip of an escalation. But the genocide of the Jewish people in this part of the world started with the dehumanization of the other, alienating, marginalizing, excluding, kicking out of civilian life with racial laws, and even getting to have those racial laws that excluded another people as such. This is the beginning of the genocide. So today we have the moral obligation to stop it. And this is to be the last genocide. The last genocide of our history, inshallah, and the last crime that we allow Israel to commit against the Palestinians, especially with impunity. Thank you. The more we clap, the less time we will have for your questions.
Yeah, ok. Abbiamo davvero pochissimi minuti. Ringrazio ancora i nostri ospiti. Alle 2:30 c'è un'altra conferenza di Carla Benelli, storica dell'arte di Pro Terra Sancta di Gerusalemme. che terrà un seminario. Avevamo pensato tutta la giornata organizzata così, e posso lasciare però, ragazzi, davvero, ragazze e ragazzi, davvero pochissimi minuti. C'erano 3 associazioni, 3 studenti di 3 associazioni studentesche che volevano dire proprio giusto una parola. Inviterei qui, scusatemi, me l'ero segnato, Claudia Marinetti, dov'è? Claudia, ci sei? Vieni qua, che è rappresentante degli studenti in senato accademico. Josip Nicolai, giusto? Vieni qua. Cambiare rotta. E poi la nostra, nel senso che è un'associazione qui di architettura, Arca, e Anna Panico, eccola là. Allora ragazzi, vi pregherei davvero, siccome l'aula dobbiamo dare spazio all'altra conferenza, vi pregherei di stare proprio in 1 minuto, 1 o 2 minuti ciascuno, scusatemi, ma siamo andati larghissimi. Grazie. Grazie ancora per aver partecipato alla conferenza, grazie a tutti e tutti.
Buongiorno a tutti, e volevo ringraziare il professor Weizman e la dottoressa Albanese per averci fornito questa mappa del genocidio oggi, e che mai come ora è necessaria per aprirci gli occhi. Grazie anche al Dipartimento di Architettura e all'Università per aver ospitato questo evento, che fa sì che l'Università continui effettivamente ad essere un luogo di discussione, di dialogo e di dibattito. L'uso della cartografia e dell'analisi degli spazi ci dimostra oggi come il dibattito su ciò che sta accadendo non è soltanto una questione politica e giuridica, ma non si tratta, diciamo, solo di definire parametri, ma si tratta di un genocidio, e il genocidio è una causa perpetrata da un governo criminale e coloniale contro un popolo, come ci ha spiegato anche molto bene la dottoressa Francesca Albanese. Il contributo che vorrei portare come studentessa che attraversa questa università come spazio politico e vive questo tempo in modo critico riguarda il mondo là fuori, un mondo che in questi giorni non è rimasto fermo a guardare. Centinaia di migliaia di persone, 1 milione soltanto sabato, si sono riversate nelle strade, nelle piazze per denunciare i crimini commessi da Israele. Tra questi milioni di persone ho visto tante e tanti di voi presenti qua oggi, e di questo ne sono molto felice. E questo rende ancora più importante e prezioso questo evento di oggi. Portiamo quello che vi chiedo oggi e che dico a tutte e a tutti è di portare questa mobilitazione che abbiamo portato nelle piazze e nelle strade anche qua dentro gli spazi della nostra università. Ci chiedo di mobilitarci e di agitarci, perché le risposte vaghe ormai non bastano più, e di non fermarci soprattutto finché la Palestina non sarà libera e finché Israele e i suoi alleati saranno giudicati dai tribunali e dalla storia per i crimini commessi. Non restiamo immobili, anzi usiamo la consapevolezza del nostro privilegio e il nostro senso di giustizia per essere solidali e combattere per chi di privilegi non ne ha più oppure non ne ha mai avuti. Restiamo umani. Grazie a tutti.
Allora, io sarò velocissimo perché non voglio rubare spazio. Sono Josip di Cambiare Rotta. Noi da 2 anni ormai ci mobilitiamo anche all'interno di Roma 3 per non soltanto dare un sostegno alla Palestina, ma per chiedere azioni concrete. La rottura immediata di quegli accordi che ancora oggi legano questa università all'apartheid sionista, al genocidio, ma anche alla guerra, perché ricordiamo che siamo l'università pubblica con più membri dentro la Medor, quindi legati alla Leonardo SPA, quindi rompiamo questi accordi, ci teniamo a dirlo chiaro e tondo. Abbiamo visto nelle piazze di tutto il paese la mobilitazione, ha ripreso, l'Italia ha dimostrato che sa da che parte stare, allora anche a Roma 3 è successo qualcosa nelle ultime settimane si sono viste mobilitazioni anche dentro questa università come non si vedevano da davvero anni. Sono anni che cerchiamo di portare questi punti, finalmente abbiamo visto qualcosa che si risveglia, abbiamo visto un preconcentramento enorme l'altro giorno per la manifestazione nazionale, dove anche Roma 3 si è rappresentata con le parole d'ordine di bloccare tutto, di rompere gli accordi. Allora su questo dobbiamo assolutamente insistere. Ci tengo a dire un'ultimissima cosa, ovvero che poche ore fa Azione Universitaria giovanile del partito di governo di Giorgia Meloni si è espressa proprio Azione Universitaria di Roma 3 attaccando questo evento. Io penso che la risposta migliore sia un'aula gremita come questa per rimandare al mittente le accuse di chi ci accusa di sostenere il terrorismo. Allora lo ribadiamo chiaro e tondo: i terroristi sono quelli che oggi stanno dalla parte degli israeliani, di chi oggi porta avanti un genocidio, di chi oggi arresta gli attivisti della Global Summum Flotilla e non dice niente. Allora continuiamo in tutto il paese e anche dentro questa università a costruire un'opposizione alla guerra e al genocidio. Continuiamo a costruire un'opposizione a questo governo che va mandato a casa perché è un governo complice in tutto e per tutto. Allora io ci tengo soltanto a rilanciare a un'assemblea aperta per tutti gli studenti questo mercoledì 8 alle ore 11 al Prato di Studi Umanistici. Continuiamo a portare avanti la mobilitazione con atti concreti, facciamo schierare Roma 3 una volta per tutte, stop agli accordi, Palestina libera. Grazie.
Buongiorno a tutte. Prendiamo parola come Arca. Siamo un'associazione studentesca di questo dipartimento. Consapevoli della fertilità di questo momento di scambio, ci inseriamo con questo intervento, sperando che rimanga accesa l'energia dell'immobilitazione attuale. Raccogliere questa forza è fondamentale per costruire un consenso collettivo che sopravviva alle risacche successive ai picchi mediatici. Leggiamo perché ora più che mai le parole sono importanti. Vogliamo che sedimentino dentro di noi e negli spazi in cui vengono pronunciate. Ci riteniamo fortunate e fiere di studiare e di farlo abitando uno spazio culturale che sceglie di aprire l'anno accademico con un posizionamento chiaro sul genocidio in corso, subito dal popolo palestinese da parte del governo israeliano. Ci permettiamo dunque di navigare questa preziosa occasione per unirci alle voci delle ospiti e presentarci come auditrici attive e partecipi. Oltre che come persone cittadine, non possiamo non responsabilizzarci come comunità studentesca che si occupa di spazio, delle agentività e dei corpi che lo abitano. Il nostro campo di studi richiama urgentemente a una più sentita attenzione alle questioni politiche chiamate in causa.
Sappiamo che lo spazio non è neutro, come non lo sono le sue rappresentazioni e le sue occupazioni. Riconosciamo la violenza spaziale e la pericolosità della strumentalizzazione dell'architettura, dell'urbanistica e del paesaggio come mezzi di segregazione, di cancellazione programmata dell'abitare e disinvenzione dell'esistenza stessa di un luogo, nel suo tessuto urbano e nella sua memoria collettiva. Lo sterminio in Palestina si consuma attraverso la coincidenza tra genocidio, ecocidio e spaziocidio. La guerra ai corpi è accompagnata dalla guerra al territorio, alla possibilità di esistere, di muoversi, di abitare. Ci opponiamo alla cancellazione come strumento architettonico e urbanistico e a un tipo di ricostruzione che, travestita da innovazione, nasconde le logiche della rendita e dell'esclusione. Impegniamoci affinché l'architettura possa ritrovare la sua vocazione politica, civile e generativa, immaginando spazi liberi che rappresentino voce collettiva.
Oggi vogliamo iniziare da qui. Invitiamo tutte, tutti e tutto al termine di questo incontro ad unirsi ad un corteo che percorrerà gli spazi del mattatoio, passando per le realtà che lo compongono, per poi tornare in quest'aula e proseguire la giornata con la comunicazione di Carla Benelli. Vogliamo promuovere l'adesione dell'ex mattatoio a partire proprio dal Dipartimento di Architettura, alla campagna SPLAI, Spazi Liberi dall'Apartheid israeliana, per rendere manifesta una solidarietà attiva di questo spazio con il popolo palestinese, contribuire alla creazione di una rete di spazi che si dichiarano liberi da ogni forma di discriminazione e si impegnano a non intrattenere rapporti con sistemi di ingiustizia e oppressione. Domani continuiamo, dopodomani, mercoledì, all'assemblea che ha citato prima Josip, continuiamo queste battaglie con un'assemblea aperta e collettiva per parlarne insieme. Vi preghiamo, se volete partecipare al corteo, invitiamo ovviamente tutti, le associazioni, gli studenti, i docenti, chi è venuto qui per ascoltare questa importantissima conferenza che aprirà e segnerà questo anno, speriamo, e quindi dovremo fare un po' attenzione al percorso, ovviamente, come sapete, essendo un corteo. Quindi chi vorrà partecipare, vi preghiamo di uscire da questo lato alla vostra destra e aspettare 5 minuti per preparare la testa del corteo e poi partiremo. Ci dispiace, lo sappiamo che è ora di pranzo, sarà un corteo breve, però secondo noi è molto importante e quindi vi ringraziamo per l'attenzione, per il tempo che avete dedicato oggi. Grazie.
Allora, scusate, vi chiedo solo un altro, veramente 5 secondi. Ci tenevo a ringraziare tutta la comunità di Roma 3, della nostra università, dai tecnici al personale amministrativo, al direttore che è stato qui per tutto il tempo, ma ci tenevo anche a ricordare, perché nel colloquio bellissimo tra Francesca e Eyal si è parlato della difficoltà di parlare della Palestina negli spazi universitari. Io volevo ricordare Maria Gabriella Gallo, che è stata una nostra personale tecnico, che proprio pochi giorni prima dell'evento del 7 ottobre abbiamo organizzato un evento dentro la Biennale dello Spazio Pubblico proprio qui con l'ambasciatrice della Palestina. Dobbiamo veramente, ci tenevo molto a ricordare questa cosa, perché questa è un'università dove l'evento di oggi avete resistito, io non so, la resistenza proprio anche fisica non è casuale, le cose non avvengono per caso, avvengono e si radicano solo in luoghi dove questo pensiero viene da lontano. Quindi ancora grazie a tutti.
Chiedo scusa.
Scusate, c'è Francesca che vuole...
Scusate, però ho dimenticato, mi ero impegnata, a parte che Eyal ed io siamo veramente felici di unirci al corteo e siete fantastici. Mi fate pensare di aver sbagliato facoltà. Bravissimi, però c'è una cosa che volevo dire, che sono stata sollecitata prima dell'incontro, in contemporanea, ma non vi dico di andare, però proprio per rendervi consapevoli, c'è sotto il Tribunale di Piazzale Clodio a Roma un presidio per i ragazzi, 100 arrestati. Ha detto, scusate.
Grazie ancora, arrivederci.
Grazie molto, tutto.
Grazie. No, really. No, he's going to take a nap now.
Io credo che resterò proprio in questa
Per chi vuole, alle 21 al Monk con Eyal Weizman, Francesca Albanese, Ilan Pappé e Alban Abulsi. Stasera Unpacking Israel, Unpacking Palestine. Ingresso libero, sarà un delirio.